So everybody know. Hey, this is recorded. We put these up as a durable resource on a website where you can view all the prior Dean's Workshop series. So that's that. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Lotz. I am a assistant dean of academic program development in undergraduate studies here at the Dietrich School at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm director of undergraduate studies in political science, and I'm a teaching professor and advisor in political science as well. Um, and today we're going to be talking about addressing student anxiety in the classroom, which is a super broad thing. I will but scratch it, begin the conversation, certainly not definitively end it, is the way I will run with this. My hope is this is the kind of guide that you can take this, build out, ask questions, talk to peers, talk to colleagues, collaborate, and build a strategy for yourself that'll work. I'll have the chat box open. I may not address questions in the moment. You're welcome to raise them. I'll certainly go through them all at the end. And that's what we'll be up to. So, when this was pitched to me, I think the explicit reasoning was one of um, I teach political science. There are a particular set of current political anxieties that we know many students, not just in my discipline, but lots of disciplines, are experiencing. And that led to a conversation about broader anxiety management in all sorts of ways. And so I'm going to kind of talk about all those things together today. So what we're going to chat about today? Well, we're going to talk about the anxiety hydra. We'll talk about why addressing. Why did I go with addressing as the way to describe it? Because I really very purposefully want to utilize that term. I think it's a valuable term for us to think about in our teaching practice to address anxiety in that classroom. We'll talk some about our role. When do we act and when do we guide? And I think there's two different things there that we'll talk about. We'll talk about some policies and practices of what we might describe as calm classes, ways that you can, in advance, help students with the normal anxieties they bring to the classroom. There are tons of things you can do before classes start next semester, or as an add-on to your Canvas right now that can assist students right now, tomorrow in your classroom. So I think that's really helpful to talk about. We'll talk a little bit about self-care and our own anxiety because, as you'll see, one of the anxieties in the classroom is our own. And so a little bit of thought towards, hey, that plays a role in anxiety in the classroom too. I think it's really important. And then instead of like a Q&A, I'd like to do just some best practices sharing and communal discussion. Our call is going to be full of people who have tactics and strategies and things that you use that you might find very helpful. And so I want to hear those and have those be expressed as part of this as well. So that's our agenda for today. I make sure I'm flipping along. Um, all right. So the anxiety hydra. About two-thirds of college students report overwhelming anxiety. Many report anxiety as the number one stress, the most difficult thing that they're facing in college. It's particularly acute in the first year. Studies after study shows that we see a huge spike in anxiety when students arrive at college because of all the transitions that happen, all the new school, new life, everything is new. And so huge anxiety spikes happen then. Another spike we advisors anecdotally notice is among seniors. There's a real ratcheting up of anxiety and a whole host of ways that students deal with that anxiety. Some normal, some positive, some entirely negative. But it's another population that can get particularly anxious. I think it's important to kind of address that in this way. And I'm going to use the metaphor of a hydra because I think it's so helpful as a metaphor. Each time you think you're dealing with one anxiety, another two can emerge, right? And so I think a hydra is a really good way to think of it. There are all sorts of paths to anxiety amongst the college students. Some of the resources in the prior slide I referenced from National Education Association, and there's a Harvard piece on anxiety in the classroom. List through these. You can find a bunch of different lists. They're all different because there are so many differences. And each one of these you can parse down into smaller things. One big one is anxieties around success. So that can be classroom success, students who are carrying a lot of anxiety drilled into them about being successful in the classroom. A subset of those are the grade anxieties that some students are going to bring to your class. The student who is anxious as they're going to fail is experiencing anxiety. The student who's anxious that they're going to get an A minus is also experiencing anxiety. It's different, and we might approach it a little differently, and you might kind of, try and have them, use strategies to deal with it in different ways. But it's still anxiety, and they're still feeling that experience, and it's affecting their ability to be successful. Then there's all the career path life stuff that the traditional students generation is experiencing, and non-traditional students are also experiencing, right? The decision to come back to college at a different point in life is an anxious thing and can bring sort of concern. Am I doing the right thing? And so that whole host of nervousness happens around that. That's both, am I doing the right thing? Is this going to help me in that? I'm worried about the possibilities of it. In my discipline right now, when we have mass layoffs in what we might describe as the public policy sector, students are slowly saying to themselves, what am I going to do for a living? How will I ever get a job? I know that our students are at least anxious, and I imagine many of yours are too in moments like this. There are all sorts of financial pressures on our students that lead to their anxieties. Many of our students work part-time or full-time, and that means they're juggling very specific financial pressures they're dealing with. They're balancing school and work. They may be underpaid. They may be shouldering part of family burden, financial burdens. I had a student who tried so hard to balance his parents' demands that he support their family business and still be an active student, and just constantly the stress of having to do that was leading to his non-success in classes, let alone the actual time he spent doing that. Then there's all the career path financial pressures. The students are anticipating financial pressures. It can affect that as well. Social anxiety and loneliness is strong and such an anxiety source for our students. So, the social anxiety of college campus, they're carrying this stuff, right? What's going on outside of your class when they're engaging with their friend groups, when they're dealing with the people who live on their floor or live in their apartment, or joining an organization, or feeling fundamentally alone or removed from friends. I can't meet friends is I mean, if you don't follow the Pit Reddit, you should follow the Pit Reddit for a lot of reasons. But one of them is just to see, I don't know, every 2 weeks someone posts, "Hey, how do I make friends? I'm really lonely." It's super common. We know that, and that doesn't just disappear when they walk into our classrooms. They carry that into our classrooms. Mental health is an important thing, right? There are anxiety disorders. Right? We're talking here about all just the general anxieties of life, but lots of students experience um, mental health crises, both period and ongoing, that feature increased anxiety levels, anxiety triggers, all sorts of anxiety aspects that exist there. Um, as I mentioned earlier, current political events and the current political climate doesn't help. We're living in particularly anxious times, and regardless of which part of the political aisle you're on, I can imagine expressions of anxiety are a strong one. My specialty is propaganda, so it doesn't take me too long to make the point that every political party and talking head is invested in convincing you to be more afraid, because oftentimes fear is a great motivator. So even the sources that are trusted sources about these things can up the anxiety and nervousness of them. And then our students, and probably us too, deal with lack of sleep. Lack of sleep is a huge anxiety increaser. And it ties into our students' behavior patterns and the way that they deal with the coursework in our classes. And so it's absolutely like that. And so this just makes a Hydra approach to things, right? Every time we cut off one of these, every time you make success in one of these, two more emerge, and it can see overwhelming and get out of control. And that's what our students are sitting there in our classrooms when we're expecting them to have a really in-depth conversation of this thinker or this piece they consumed or this principle that they just learned about. They're carrying all this on top of that. Um, this is a comic from an online comic I love called Order of the Stick. And it's kind of a humorous approach to the Hydra. The Hydra becomes more deadly with each decapitation. If we don't do something, why? They'll get out of control. And the humorous response is once they got to so many heads, it grew too many heads for its own blood supply and it passed out. The Hydra got too big to sustain itself. That's kind of a humorous approach to it. But in the college setting, and this is something that really comes out in the dean's office, and why I wanted to talk about this, is there are a bunch of student outcomes that happen when students, quote unquote, collapse under the weight of the anxiety hydra, right? When there are too many heads, there's just too much to bear with, students can collapse. And it can lead to all sorts of really harmful externalities that they deal with. They often will deal with their anxieties by avoidance and by ceasing attendance in the class. And so the instant their anxieties affix upon, oh, I didn't turn in the assignment for my professor's class, then your class becomes an anxiety source, and then they are inclined to stay out of your class. They avoid, they cease attending, they ostrich. Students are exceedingly skilled at doing this, unfortunately. This avoidance means they do all the things that can't help them be successful in the classroom. I'd say to students, literally, it's listed on my syllabus. I say the spot to be if you're feeling behind or if you're worried about missing assignment is in class or in my office hours. That's the safest spot for you when you are feeling anxious that you're behind in the class because I can listen to that and I'm the one who can help you get caught back up. But their anxiety, when it gets too much, might lead them to stop connecting to you as a research. They may withdraw from one course or all courses, which is oftentimes a good thing, right? A single withdrawal that helps them get out of a bind, relax a little bit in their other classes, stay caught up. That can be a really powerful tool for a student. But a pattern of constant withdrawals or withdrawal from term after term of withdrawing from all courses, that can leave a student behind in their academic progress. And so suddenly they're tacking on an extra summer, which costs them money, an extra semester, which costs them a huge amount of money, right? An extra year, an extra 2 years. They can really add up on students. They can get all Fs in a term where they collapse under the weight of the hydra of anxiety. And that leads to grade point difficulty as well as being behind. Ultimately, these can spiral into them to just dropping out. They just disappear from us. They remove themselves from the university. And sometimes taking a break from university and saying, okay, I'm going to sort things out. I'm going to return when I'm ready, or this might not be the right thing for me. I'm going to return if I ever decide it is. That can be really powerful, but there can be a huge shame burden that gets placed on students who drop out without a conversation with someone like the dean's office or advisor. And so they just disappear and they just drop out. They never have the conversation about why and how to get back on track and where college fits in one's life or doesn't fit. And that's why we really worry about this. They can do sort of that's tomorrow Andrew's problem activities, right? Which I'm notoriously bad at myself. Is this is a problem for tomorrow, Andrew? I'm not going to worry about it today, right? They can seek extensions with us, endless extensions with us, and many of you have experienced that on this call, right? The student who asks for so many extensions that they're not able to do the current work, and so they're asking for an extension to extend the prior assignments extension grace, that can be get out of control. G grades can be a really powerful tool for students. We'll talk a little bit about them later, but they can also lead to the next semester being one of intense anxiety and stress for them because of what they're going through. And another dean's office thing is when they have increased anxiety about a class and it's all up and they're all nervous, the likelihood of turning to cheating or to AI shortcuts in a completing assignments may increase. And so, or just bad work. And so they might run afoul of, committing an academic integrity issue because they're trying to resolve an anxiety problem. And they think, oh, if the assignment goes away, I will be less anxious. When no, the anxiety needs to be dealt with, and then we can work on our assignments. That's what we need to work on with students, but they might reach for the wrong tools because they're collapsing under the weight of all this stuff. So that's why I want to talk about it and ask us, how do we address this as instructors? What's appropriate for us to address? What's not appropriate for address? I want to talk a little bit about who do we work with to support students. There are so many people here at the university and in the Dietrich School who could help us support our students that part of it is just connecting to them and working with them. And then thinking, how do our classrooms actively and passively support our students? Are there active ways we can do this? And there are other passive ways to support our students. Stuff we can do on the design side, on the envisionment of the course side that can help with this. So I'm going to talk about those. So why addressing? Why do I use that term? Um, I think it's important because I think a good foundation is acknowledging student anxiety in the classroom. This is one of those things that you see increased rates. Some of the studies that showed earlier, I referenced earlier, increased rates in students expressing anxiety is a concern. I imagine that students have always experienced anxiety as a concern. They just were eras where students weren't as comfortable talking about it. And so, in some ways, like acknowledging there's anxiety about the classroom, about our class procedures, about our offices, our institutions, it's a good thing because then we talk about it. And so, it's okay to address anxiety in the classroom. You can say to your class, hey, I know people are stressed right now. This is a hard thing. The crisis that's just happened is surely weighing on all of our minds. It's okay to say that kind of stuff. Knowing it's happening and saying to one's class, hey, this is going on. I know it's midterms week and you're pressed with assignments in every one of these. Here's why I'm asking you to make sure to prioritize mine, give it the time it's due, because if you don't do this, you won't be successful. You got to acknowledge it. You can navigate that in a variety of ways. Taking occasional moments of just how are we doing? How are you doing? You've all had that day where you look out at the class, you get a couple comments, the first set of comments, and you have a new discussion, and you're like, oh, today's going to be one of those days. The weather changed, some event has happened. It's a midterm day. Addressing it sometimes can relieve it. Sometimes it's enough to just say like, hey, I'm struggling too. We're all struggling. Let's refocus on what matters in the room here, right? We're learning something cool. We're going to do this. And for a moment, it's not going to solve any of the problems going on, but we can be here and be together and support one another and learn something cool. So that can be really powerful. And there are strategies for addressing that are different based around addressing it to the classroom and addressing it in individual student communication. Right? There's one set of tools where you talk to the classroom and you just say like, hey, we as a group, there's some anxiety. And then there's those signals that a student sends that they're being anxious that you might observe or that they might express to you. And a response to those are going to be different. I'll talk a little bit about those. Um, so we can think about some moments that may apply to all. There may be a crisis on our own campus, right? There just was a Pitt ENS alert came out, right, about a recent crime on campus happened, right, and it's something that everybody's thinking about, concerned about. Uh, this is a kind of macabre example, but when I was an undergraduate in 19, sorry, a long time ago, The first week of school, the very first, our student newspaper ran an article about the headline article was a student who biked all the way from 4 states over. Took him like, a month to bike to our campus with his dad because he was into biking. And so that was like the headline of our school newspaper. And it's like a horrifying, but he was killed by a bus while biking a week into the first term. And so the one student that everybody that semester knew had suddenly perished. And so it was a crisis on campus. And it was appropriate for instructors to talk about our class and say, hey, we got to talk about this because this just affected the us here. Um, there are also moments where there can be a crisis in a school setting, right? It's not Pitt, but there is a shooting in a school setting. There is violence in a campus. There is something going on that we know because we're in academia, our students are students, they have heard about this, they're carrying those stresses. And there may be an event of global significance, right? The day after an election, the 9/11, right? There are moments that have global significance where sometimes you just have to stop, no matter what the class is, no matter what the topic. It's appropriate to just say, hey, we're all human beings together here. Let's address what's going on. What are we feeling? You don't have to have them dominate the classroom, but a little bit of that can really help everyone just kind of ground themselves and say, okay, we've dealt with it, we've talked about it. Now let's move forward. There may be particular ones to your classroom by discipline. There may be things that your discipline gets into that are particularly anxiety-inducing topics. And so oh, that's the day I'm going to get into that. It certainly happens in my discipline all the time. And so there are moments where, like, I know it's a day that this can be specific to this, so I can give a trigger warning in advance to students and say, like, hey, this we're going to talk about this. If you need to step outside, step outside. It's okay. It's never a problem to do that if you need to. Things like that can be addressed. The broader question we might ask ourselves is our role as instructors. When do we act and when are we a guide to our students? Might be helpful. Um, Increasingly, so the American Psychological Association has a very depressing piece on this. Increasingly, there's more and more demand on psychological services at college, right? More and more students are seeking psychological services. More and more students are expressing anxiety. They're seeking support for that anxiety, and while colleges are scrambling and working very hard to give those supports, Pitt has absolutely increased its support of undergraduates in this way. The number of staff, the available methods of them connecting have been transformative in the past 10 years I've seen while teaching. It's been very impressive what Pitt has been doing, but still we know it might not be enough. And so oftentimes faculty are the first line of defense, right? We are the first ones. And that can be a spot that I think is I describe as between intimidating and exhausting. Um, it can be intimidating hearing you're the first line of defense for student anxiety. And so we can say, oh, this is really intimidating. I don't want to deal with this. I'm not trained to deal with this. Look, I want to come teach. My specialty is not managing and navigating student anxiety. So I'm going to select a strategy that just is, I don't have to deal with it, right? I'm not gonna worry about it. There are people that enact course policies that I'm not a particular fan of, but they might say, you know, like I don't care policies, right? Which we know faculty have done that before, where it's like, listen, these are your personal things. You need to sort them out, come to class, and be okay. I don't think those are helpful, but I think some people strike that when they're intimidated by this. The other end of the spectrum, of course, is it becomes exhausting that we get so concerned about our students' anxiety that we suddenly are stepping way over our boundaries and we're becoming not just teacher, but a counselor, and we are stepping in and, ensuring that our students are okay, and over worrying about them and over protecting them, and checking in on them and increasing our workload and potentially increasing our anxiety by these efforts. And so finding that right spot is really kind of a challenge. And it's something that I certainly haven't mastered, but it's something that I think we all are kind of doing, where we find how can we let the specialists be the specialists, but be there for our students in order to care about them, to connect to them without overwhelming ourselves becomes the challenge here. Um, so first and foremost, my advice is add resources to the syllabus and to the Canvas page. There's no harm in adding in additional resources. Currently, if you look at our university syllabus boilerplate, it's a little stripped down. There are, speaking of political anxieties, there's the one that some faculty are experiencing are from the Department of Education and the Dear Colleague letter and things like this. And so universities are stripping out some of traditional boilerplate, items on syllabi. Know that you can add your own. You can include all sorts of things. If you think it's helpful for students, you're welcome to include this in your resources section of your Canvas, on your syllabus, wherever you like. Giving students guideposts and signposts to the resources that can support them in specific instances is not a problem. And so you can add those in. Some of those, the non-exhaustive list is the counseling center. These are all things that I mention or put direct links to in when I'm teaching. The counseling center, and note the counseling center provides both psychological and sexual assault services, like sexual assault crisis services. So that can be a good thing to add in to inform students about. Withdrawal deadlines. I have a withdrawal and G grade policy section of my syllabi that literally say, like, hey, here's the withdrawal deadline. Here's when a withdrawal makes sense. A single withdrawal doesn't sink the ship. Sometimes it can be good for you. Here's my G grade policy. I'm very clear that G grades are about making up missed work about a crisis moment, but you can't use a G grade for I never showed up and I never did anything, right? So being clear about that can really help students know what's going to happen, how to navigate that, when they might ask, how they might ask. Study lab as a resource on campus. We have a great study lab that has both peer tutors and ed professionals. I know Mary Napoli in the study lab is fantastic. Her team is fantastic. At connecting to students, they're just awesome, and they are so good at learning where your students at, giving them tools to be successful. And so saying, hey, we've got the study lab, and it's if you're struggling with the reading or how to organize your time effectively or how to get through this stuff, they're the resource. The writing center to give writing feedback. I tell uh, when I'm training, I train the graduate students in political science, and I tell them when giving writing feedback, since our discipline isn't writing, that I have my rule of threes. I will correct three grammatical, clarity, spelling things. And I correct the first three, and then I will usually write like, "Hey, you need to seek the writing center. Show a draft of this writing center in the future. When you resubmit this, show that take it to them as well. They can help you with that sentence level construction, organization stuff. So I can help you with the ideas in this piece. The writing center is a great resource. There's some options for housing instability. One of the big stressors of our students is housing instability. And so reminding them, hey, if you're having a problem with your social situation with your roommates, Resident Life can help. The campus housing offices can help you if you're experiencing a crisis in your off-campus housing. Emergency funds, if they have a financial shortfall, if they suddenly, lose their part-time job or, some other economic crisis and a little bit of money helps them not have to leave the university or drop out of classes, there are monies available. The provost office has some emergency funds. There are others in the teacher school for student crisis funds. Like they exist. Students have to qualify for them. There's only so much, but the provost office, I mean, they really do. They care more than anybody else about those 4 and 6 year retention rates. And if a few bucks to help a student like not lose their housing or be able to get a car repair done, if a few bucks can help a student get through that, sometimes they're willing to do that. So it's worth pointing students towards those emergency funds applications. The pit pantry if they're experiencing food insecurity, Thriftsburg if they need clothing, resolve crisis services if they're expressing self-harm or you're concerned about that. The Office of International Services, if they're stressed about what's going on and they're an international student. There are other community resources. Prasad Center in Pittsburgh, we're blessed to have a LGBTQ plus mental health support organization here in our community. Central Outreach for community health. Casa San Jose, if they are, stressed about policing on the streets and if they're an international student, what to do if I'm approached by ICE. There's all sorts of supports for students, and you can make them know where those things are. And knowing can relieve your feel of needing to act because you can just say, hey, like if this is stressing you, here's where to seek it. That can be a huge support to students. You can also think about the chief moments when we connect to them. We connect to them in the classroom and in interpersonal connection in office hours or email. Um, these can be the moments where we might have to act, right? We might have to do something. There's anxiety that's expressing itself in the classroom in some way. I can tell the students are upset. I can tell the group is nervous. Students are raising these things. The climate is anxious. We address those in the classroom. That's on us. And then interpersonal connection. If a student reaches out in email, talks to us in our office hours, we are human beings. We can respond. We can be there for them. We can say, like, I care about you. I want you to be successful. Here's the resources, to do that. Sometimes just listening to a student express their anxieties and saying, thank you for expressing that, right? I'm not a mental health professional. You should talk to the counseling center. It can support you more, but I hear you. And here's some of my things. That's okay. Students can really find that to be a bit grounding and help them get through these moments. So we can think about some of the policies and practices of Calm classes. There are things you can do to help ease certain common student anxieties. And I thought it's perfect to seek guidance from the experts on calm situations. I can think of no better expert on being calm amidst an anxiety-provoking moment than the National Park Service of Canada that gives great guidelines on what to do in case of a bear attack. Obviously, this is tongue in cheek. But in case of bear attack, what do? We stay calm. We speak to the bear. We make yourself appear big. We don't drop our pack, and we don't make sudden movements. Thank you, National Park Service of Canada. Right. Obviously, tongue in cheek. But honestly, these 5 things I think can really help us think about how to navigate anxiety situations when students express anxieties and about approaching a calm class, right? So I've kind of translated them into something more useful for us. Um, uh, and we can talk about each of them, right? So first, speaking that calm voice, even if you're also stressed, present a calm and in charge demeanor, right? Students, um, and groups in general, when we are expressing our anxiousness and we're showing our anxiousness, that can lead to others' anxieties increasing. And so giving yourself a moment, saying like, hey, right? Like just being calm and in charge can be very helpful in moments of navigating anxiety, right? When a student is spiraling in your office and giving more and more and more things, which I know there are a couple assistant deans on the call, and you at least have experienced these in in your dean's hours offices, but I know faculty do too, where a student, you say, how you doing? And 10 minutes later, the student is in absolute tears and has expressed everything possible that's wrong, right? Just a calm, don't worry, we've got this, I'm here for you, can be really helpful in those moments. Second, speaking to and about the anxiety. So, you talk to the bear, you say, bear, stay away. You can you can do that in this case too, right? You can say, speak to and talk about the anxiety. It's acknowledging the anxiety helps people a little bit. Just saying, yeah, I hear that you're anxious in this. I hear this is stressing you out. I understand that you're really worried about your grade in this class. I hear that. And I recognize that students are often concerned about their grades in this class. You can say that kind of stuff. And saying it can sometimes help. Keep in mind, and this is the make yourself look big. Obviously, don't like make yourself look big, and don't use this as a chance to be, some firm disciplinarian. I'm the instructor and it's my class. But you can confidently relate to students something like, listen, I'm in charge of the class. I set the policies, right? I'm the one who can determine these things. Calm down, right? We're in this moment. You're talking to the right person. If you're worried about this affecting the classroom, I'm the person you should be working with, right? Make yourself big in that way. You can be the resource for them in this way. You can even say things listen, I'm your professor. I can help you out. I can pass you to an advisor who will know all different the supports. You can do a pit concern connection about them that can get them, or a PeopleSoft instructor concern to an advisor, like letting an advisor know, hey, in pathways. You can let an advisor know, like, hey, I'm worried about this student. That's really helpful to advisors. And you can say, hey, student, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to send a concern to your advisor, and they're going to reach out and they're going to support you with other things that are going on. You're in charge. You've made yourself bigger, metaphorically, right? And that can really help a student in a moment when they're really stressing. Um, Remember that, don't drop your pack. And bear attacks, I guess it's because it might protect you from the bear swiping you with its claws. Horrifying. But don't drop your syllabus. Your syllabus usually has what you need on it. Your syllabus has the course policies. Your syllabus has the resources. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But your syllabus carefully arrayed can be a really good tool for this and can be like, listen, I've accounted for this in the syllabus already. We've got you taken care of. Let's reread the assignment. Let's talk about it, and you can see what's going on here. And the don't flee, don't run. The version of this is make changes only with thoughtful care. It's okay to change things in a classroom. It's okay to adjust. And you have to think carefully about adjustments and just do it thoughtfully. Walk in slow, deliberate manner if you're going to adjust the class, because that can help students out. Um, I'm going to share a moment that I personally experienced this, where a person did just some of these on this list. I work in Posvar Hall on campus. It's one of my offices. It's where my office is. I was in the elevator in Posvar Hall, and the lights went out and the elevator froze. And talk about an anxiety-inducing situation. And thank goodness for a person, I still don't know who they were. My sense was they were a grad student. Uh, he, in a very loud voice, said, everyone sit down right where you are and let's all share where we're from. And his voice was just calm enough and just loud enough. We all sat down, and he said, he was from somewhere in China. I forget the province now, but he just said, "Oh, I'm from this spot in China, and I came here, 2 years ago, and that's where I'm from. Where are you all from?" That's all he had to say. And the rest of us just kind of started talking about where we're from. And then a couple people acknowledged, yeah, this is kind of scary. We're all trapped in this thing. And oh, don't worry, someone will get to us. But just that sudden burst of calmness made an anxious situation to a calm situation. And so you can do that too. So thinking about our courses, the things we can do on our courses to calm our students. You can build them into your courses to limit anxieties and address anxieties in advance. A big one is a grading ethos. I think grading ethos, the way we express it to students, the way we actually do it in classes, sometimes can either alleviate or increase anxiety. And so finding ones that alleviate anxiety can be really powerful. Remember, student success is the goal. Student success is the goal. Doesn't mean that we change our standards, doesn't mean that we make it things easier on them, but our goal needs to be student success. And so we should be setting up our syllabi so that all students can succeed, that we give them tools to be able to succeed, that if they fall behind, if they get a poor grade, it's not, well, too bad. It's here's other tools you can be successful in the next assignment. Our goal needs to be student success, and we can pre-build our assignment structures and have resources available for students to help them with that. Finding ways to remove explicit or implicit competition among students, I think can be really helpful. Um, uh, Anything that makes them feel like they're competing against each other, or that, your classic like a washout class feeling, right? This is a washout class, walking in and saying, well, a third of you aren't going to pass this class. It's not the goal, right? The goal should be this is a hard class. In the normal college classroom, a third of students don't pass this class. I'm going to be here to give you all the tools you need to succeed. And the students that don't take advantage of those tools, yeah, they're not going to pass this class. But you all in the room, you're going to be the exception to the rule. And this year, 100% of students are going to pass this class, not the 70% that normally pass or whatever. There's a way to phrase it. You can still have it be that way. You can still run your washout class in your big discipline. You can do that, but describe it a little differently so it invites students in and it addresses their anxieties rather than exploits their anxieties. Um, there are also lots of ungrading methods and other alternative assessments. I gave one of these talks last spring on ungraded methods and alternative assessments, which can be powerful tools for giving students more control over their grading. It's more work for them, but it gives them a sense of control and can really help them out. And so I think it's worth exploring. I'm actually been working with Mariah Curdy, who's uh, in the Writing Center uh, in English. And Mariah Curdy and I have been talking about an alternative assessments working group, which we're going to be inviting people to soon enough, which can help people with like building this into your classes and working on your grading ethos, because that can really help students. I know in my classes, when I moved to methods that are in that area, saying, look, this alleviates your stress and just refocuses you back on the value of doing the work itself as the work, students were transformative in the quality of work they did, which has then eased the stress about it as well. You can think about universal course design principles. The Teaching and Learning Center does tons of talks on these. I know Disability Resources and Services can talk to us about this too. Lee Cully from Disability Resources and Services, she came and spoke to our department about universal course design principles under the principle on the idea of increased accessibility helps everyone, right? If one person is helped by more time on an assessment, everybody's helped by more time on an assessment. So those kind of techniques can be utilized. Finally, you can think about visible flexibility and upon request flexibility. I think you have to think about both. I include in my syllabi, this is the flexibleness. These are the spots where I can be flexible. Here's how to control it. These are some of the flexibilities. And so students can see there's a little bit of flexibility in the course. They can pick 3 of the 4 assignments. They can submit a draft at this date to get feedback before the assignment date. Like you can include that stuff. And that's visible flexibility. Then also you want to think about what upon request flexibility you have, right? if a student comes to you with a crisis situation, how are you going to be there to support them? What makes sense? What are you going to say in response to that? How do you keep that manageable? How do you not overwhelm yourself with work while still being flexible to students' crisis needs and anxiety needs, right? I think that's really important. So you can work through both of those things. Um, a particular moment of anxiety, of anxiousness for students is change. And change in a classroom can really send students to the heights of anxiety. And so note that there are times when we might have to change something in our classes. And that can be a real stress increasing moment for students. And so thinking carefully about, oh, I got to change something. How do I change it? First and foremost, a syllabus is a contract, and contracts can be changed if all parties agree. I tend to approach it that way with students, like, here's what I'm going to do this semester. Here's what I'm going to expect from you. It's kind of a contract. And therefore, I say when I'm going to change something, I say we all kind of have to agree. Here's my logic of providing this change, right? We missed the other day because I was sick, and so we couldn't have class. And I did a sort of flip recording of the class. So we got a little bit of the coverage done, but we have to choose one of these two readings. Well, let them decide which one of the two readings they're going to read, right? And say the other one's valuable too. I encourage you to read it, but we'll be quizzed on just this one. That can help students out. And it's a little bit of a breather, and they don't feel stressed in that way. And it helps them navigate those changes, moments of disruption. If you're going to change something for one student, I encourage you to adjust it for all students. If you make a policy change to accommodate one student's needs, hey, it's a really stressful time. I'm really struggling. Can I have another 2 days to finish this? I think it's really good policy to say to, if you say to that student, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Say to other students in that moment, then, right? Hey, a student approached me. They wanted an extra moment to do this. I encourage all of you to keep this deadline, but if you need to this date, please take it. I think no harm with that. Most students are going to still choose the normal assignment date, especially if there's reasons on Canvas to submit it then. But I do believe in a policy of adjust for one, adjust for all. And then check on any harm from a policy change. I always ask my students this, is anybody harmed by this change in what we're doing? Does anybody see any way that someone could be hurt by us changing this? Okay, we'll talk about it. And remember, you can always enforce an earlier deadline. Some students are stressed out by deadline extensions. If you say, everybody take till Tuesday to submit this, some students are like, no, I need this to be this way or I am stressed. So you can acknowledge that and you say to them, hey, just so you know, if anybody needs me to hold you to the prior deadline, that is very much in place for you. Come let me know after class and I'll hold you to it. I have a good 5 or 6 students when I've extended a deadline because I can tell the student is stressed, the class is stressed. Hey, take till Tuesday. I'm planning the syllabus. I didn't think about when homecoming weekend was. All right, yeah, take till Tuesday, fine. You know, some students are like, no, Andrew, I need you to have this due still on Thursday. Okay, fine. I'll let you I'll help you out with that. My final point here, self-care and our own anxiety. I think this is really critical. Our anxiety as instructors is also anxiety in the classroom, right? It is anxiety in the classroom. And not just well, if I'm anxious, my students will read that and pick up on that. But our anxiety affects how we teach, how we proceed, the level of work we're able to put into these things. And so finding our ways to navigate our own anxieties is part of the challenge of, addressing anxiety in the classroom. And that means supporting ourselves and recognizing that we are beings that experience anxiety. We are not perfect teaching robots. We are just people. And that's why we're valuable in the classroom, right? We are infinitely more valuable because of our flawedness and the fact that we do have anxieties than any teaching AI ever can be. That's a kind of a bold claim, maybe, but I'm going to stand by that. The thing that we bring is our imperfectness, and that's a beautiful imperfectness. And so we bring that to the classroom so we can support ourselves in that. You can either mask it or be transparent and honest about it, right? If you suffer from anxiety disorder, you can say, like, hey, I'm having an anxious day. Sometimes that helps students out. Here's how I'm dealing with it. I can help. Some of us are good at masking it, right? I'm fantastic at masking my anxiety. As someone who says yes to every single ask that's ever been asked of them, I'm exceedingly good at masking my anxieties. Um, but either mask or be transparent and honest with students. Do one of the two, right? Whichever you're better at, whichever you need in the moment. Most days we mask. You can be open about it. This depends a lot on our subject matter of any given class or the course. In my discipline, one of the difficulties of teaching political science is like I have to look at a world that increases my anxiety, and then I have to walk into my classroom and talk about those things in a careful academic manner with my students. And so I have to spend time prior to every single class figuring out, okay, how do I get past my own anxieties on this and become a professional in this room on this? How do I do that? How do I navigate that? And that takes time and it takes care and it takes training. And we're still all working on that training. You are still working on that. No matter how advanced in your teaching career you are, we're still mastering that in some ways. And so it's okay to be working on that. My advice, this is my official advice. You've been assigned this. This is your assignment from my office, from the Assistant Dean of Academic Program Development. You are now assigned to sometime this week, take 2 hours, put an out of office notice in your email for those 2 hours, walk to the Carnegie Art Museum or to Phipps and just experience and don't think about work, right? And you doing that for those 2 hours, are you addressing anxiety in the classroom too, right? Now, you don't have to do it this week. You don't have to do it in that moment. You have to do it right now. But finding a self-care strategy, finding those moments to take care of yourself helps you address anxiety in the classroom. Because if you can walk into the room when your students are having a crisis, they come to you after and they're spinning out and they're talking about all the load they're dealing with. The hydra is enormous. Everything's threatening them at once. If you know what helped me? You can be calm in that moment, you can be supportive in that moment, and you can share those strategies with them too and say it's okay to feel this way and okay to do these things. And here's how I dealt with my hydra this week. Right. And so if you're taking good care of yourself, you can say that. Like I painted this week. Right. All right. I'm going to paint this evening because I'm already stressed. Right. There's a variety of self-care strategies. Um, if you're not seeking counseling or mental health treatment for your anxiety and you have it, do so. It's important, right? Please take care of yourselves in those ways. Budget time for empowering tasks, the tasks that bring you up and pick you up. Budget time for that. Give yourself moments for that and try it with peers. Connection and belonging and support matters. Talk about your anxiety with a colleague in an informal sense. I had a colleague who came to my office and just said, like, hey, can I talk to you about something that's stressing me with a student? Absolutely. Don't bear it alone, right? Make those connections, do that. Take an outing together over to the Carnegie Art Museum and stand there and look at some art together. It could be dramatically helping. Or just be open to your colleagues about it's not a harm to seek anxiety support oneself. Um, I know I went to graduate school in a time where faculty pretended like anxiety didn't exist, some faculty, and that was kind of the message given to us as graduate students. And so, like, just being open about, yeah, I work with a mental health counselor to support my mental health. That can be a huge empowering thing to make routine and ordinary for your peers and know that we're all seeking support and we're all working on this together can be really powerful. So, um, I think all of that puts you in a better spot to support and sympathize. All right. So we're close to the end of time, but I want to leave a little room for people. This isn't a Q&A, though you can ask me questions. I'd love to hear from you all how you identify, approach, and address anxiety in the classroom. How are you seeing it manifested? How does it pop up for you? How do you navigate it? I'd love to hear your voice. For as long as people want to hang out, I will. You're welcome. Please feel free to express. And if you say like, I want to express, but but after the recording's done, type that in the chat and I'll hang out and you can type that in the chat and I'll stop the recording and then that expression can come after. But anything people want to share right now?
I can share something that I do on the first day of my classes.
I love it.
A large biology class, so 325 students, and it's always in the fall, so they're coming in. It's their first often class ever. Um, and so I actually start off by putting up like a one of those feelings wheels that like lists all the feelings in different quadrants. And I do like a top hat question where I have them like put a dot over how they're feeling at the
Sure.
start of that class. Um, and then I show them like a heat map basically of everybody's responses. And there's always a bright yellow, red, orange dot over anxiety.
Mhm.
And that really helps. And then I re-ask them at the end of class or even at the start of the next class or at the end of the week and see if that kind of has changed over time. So I found that helpful, but I also still see a lot of my students not necessarily going through a crisis of anxiety, but just constant steady state,
Hmm.
low to medium anxiety. And I'd love to hear if other people are doing things to help with that because I'm finding my students, if they're in that constant state of kind of background anxiety, they're actually not even able to hear any of the resources that I'm giving them. And so they're not
Sure.
even taking it in. Their brain is just constantly moving and thinking about how anxious they are. And I don't know how to get them out of that cycle.
That is such a good recognition of the like, they're not ready to hear the resources yet. And I love the idea of heat mapping. Others, what do you do in your classes? I'd love to hear. Anything else people are willing to share right now?
I can
Thomas.
jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
This is something that's probably not going to be possible in a huge bio class like that. So unfortunately, take my advice with a grain of salt. But in my smaller writing classes, students can have a certain level of perhaps executive dysfunction. And then even when I check in, those emails will pile up and that becomes another task that then feeds into the anxiety and they realize, I'm not checking in with the professor, making your check-in email very short, right? I noticed you not been in class for a few days. I just wanted to see if everything's all right. Always feel free to reach out to me if you need anything. Those types of quick emails will often then open up the larger conversation that allow you to then start scheduling things like makeups or check-ins with students. Whereas I found in the past, especially when I was a grad student, I didn't think about any of this. I just sent students massive emails with every single bullet point. You've missed this, but you can make it up if you do this. That is the same thing as having a very long syllabus that's 30 pages long that even though it's filled with resources, they'll never read and feel exhausted by, right? So starting small with the check-in in whatever way also doesn't increase your anxiety, is my advice anyway.
Great point. Yeah. Thanks, Thomas. Others, anyone else want to chime in?
If I may hop in, I mean, sometimes it's just in the presentation of the mundane things, right? That like when you're returning a paper, you talk generally about the fact that like everybody's getting their work done, that there's substantive work there, that like you appreciate the fact that under difficult circumstances, people are engaging intellectually with things in kind of the regular classroom logistics that can always be part of what we consider. And the fact of the matter is, I am rather impressed that students are doing the sort of work that they're doing in my classes under these circumstances. It is something that ought to be praised, and I think we think about like the frictions and the negative situations, and we should also be willing to respect the fact that we are getting things accomplished, and that kind of check-in and that kind of respect of the context in which students are working can be part of the way we talk to them about pretty much everything we do. It can be part of the way we talk about attendance. It can be part of the way we talk about the stresses of dealing with assignments apart from the contextual stresses of being a human being in this at this time. So it I think that not pretending that circumstances are ideal, but understanding that people are working under the stress of being subject to history at this moment, and respecting that in our communications with students is valuable.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. That's great. Yeah. And I mean, I love that. And that is a good strategy, I think, for the bigger classroom too, right? You can say, like, listen, this is every one of you is going through a really hard thing. We know that, the intro to bio, the intro to physics, like these are really hard classes. And what you're doing is amazing. So keep it up. Acknowledging that stressing can be helpful in that way. Yeah, great. We're at time, so unless other people will have like, oh, let me share the thing that's important. I don't want to keep people unduly. I don't want to be the next stressor that keeps you from getting to the next meeting, right? The number one increasing anxiety is having to talk on camera, right? So, all right, we'll end the recording there. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Take care of yourselves out there. If you have any questions, I'm available. The dean's office, everyone's available to support.